This screencast has to do with encoding information, which again is trying to take things in and process them in memory. Basically, how we store things in the brain, how we get them in there and transfer things in. And so we're going to talk in this one about a lot of different things that affect encoding as far as how easy or how difficult certain things are to remember. So definitely have pen and paper ready to go because there's a lot of terms, a lot of different things on this one. So here we go. One of the things that we have to deal with is whether or not we're talking about automatic encoding or effortful encoding. Certain things are automatically processed without our conscious knowledge. Things like sometimes space and time and frequency, things like that we don't even think about, but yet when we process memories, a lot of those things are processed and we don't really pay attention to it, but yet it's automatic. There are other things that we have to spend a little effort in terms of processing. And so, we may try and remember, a certain procedure in math or remember vocab terms for English, and we have to spend effortful time processing those. Most of the time that requires some type of rehearsal or repetition. So that's the difference between those two, automatic and effortful. Hermann Ebbinghaus, he did a lot of research with memory, and we're also going to talk about him in terms of forgetting. But Ebbinghaus years ago, way back in the 1800s, late 1800s, did research on people, and he had them try and learn a series of nonsense syllables. And believe it or not, he found some basic things. Okay, for one, he found that the amount that somebody tended to remember depended a lot on how much effort they put into studying, or in other words, how much time they spent. And that's what I think teachers have been trying to teach students for many years, but basically that's a key component. Now, there's a couple things that we look at here. One is what's called overlearning. Overlearning is continuing to study something even after you've mastered it for the first time. So, for example, if you have a list of 25 terms that you got to remember, you study those 25 terms, you keep studying them, try and quiz yourself on them. Eventually, you get to the point where, let's say that you can remember all 25 and you get them all correct. Don't stop studying those words. If you stop at that point and then go in a day or two later to take the test, you're probably going to miss some. But continue to study those words even after you've mastered them the first time. Try and see if you can get them right 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. And what that's called is overlearning. And the more overlearning that you do, the more you tend to retain. Okay, and the more consistent that learning is. Another thing is you need to learn how to study something because this will impact how well and how easy it's encoded as well. Massed practice and distributed practice. 2 different types of studying. For example, massed practice is basically the same as cramming. When you study a whole bunch of stuff, in a long time period without taking any breaks. Okay, so the night before a test, you spend 3 straight hours studying psychology. Okay, yes, you're going to remember some of that, but that's not the best method of studying. What they've found over the years is distributed practice tends to be better. If you study little bits of info for a time period and then a shorter time period and then take a break, then come back to it again. Study it again over a short time period, then take a break. So distributed practice basically means studying, taking breaks. We sometimes call that, or you'll see that sometimes referred to as the spacing effect. Especially for motor skills. If you're trying to learn how to shoot a free throw or hit a baseball, distributed practice is far better. Anytime that you're trying to remember something or learn something that's relatively not that difficult, like if you're looking at those vocab terms, study 25 vocab terms, study them for 10 minutes, and then take a break. Study them 15 minutes, take a break. Study them another 10 minutes, take a break. Instead of trying to study them for an hour straight, there's no reason to study them for an hour straight. You're going to get bored. It's not going to be very effective use of your time. Okay? You get better results with distributed. The only time you want to use massed practice is basically if it's a very complex subject, like let's say it's chemistry or physics or something like that. You've been sitting at your desk for an hour trying to figure out what you're even supposed to do. And then you finally figure it out and you think, okay, this is how it works. You do a problem, don't stop. Keep going. Keep going till you do 2, 3, 4, 5 problems in a row, because then you're going to get the hang of it and it's going to become routine. Then take a break and then transfer over and start using distributed practice. If you stop immediately after you do it the first time with mass practice, you're probably going to forget, after a break, come back and you're going to forget how you did it anyway, so it's going to waste your time again. The serial position. This is another thing that sometimes affects how easy something is to remember. If you have a list of information that you need to retain, the serial position basically says you will tend to remember things at the beginning of the list and at the end of the list easier. The primacy effect, that's what that's called, the primacy effect, says that you will retain things at the beginning of the list better. You'll retain those better. Recency effect says that you will retain things at the very end of a list better. So if you know that ahead of time and you have a list of 25 terms, the first time or two that you study those terms, study them from 1 to 25. But the next time you study them, start at number 10 and go 10 to 25 and then 1 to 10. That way you're kind of altering it up so that, again, you're going to try and get equal coverage for all those terms that you have to know. Now there's different levels of encoding, and basically on this slide it kind of tells you the different ones that we're looking at. Visual encoding is basically if you just remember what something looks like. That's a very low level of encoding. And if that's all you focus on is what something looks like, you're probably going to not process it very thoroughly, and you may end up forgetting it rather quickly. Acoustic encoding is remembering what something sounds like. It's a little bit better than visual, encoding, but it's still very low level in terms of encoding. The best type is semantic. Okay, semantic encoding. And this is considering the meaning of something or how you can use something. This is a very deep level of processing, and you'll tend to retain things better by using semantic encoding. That's why when we go over things in class, I constantly tell you to think of ways that you can apply these to yourself, or think of times when this has happened to you, because then what you're doing is you're thinking of, actual situations where these concepts have occurred. And that's basically the same as semantic encoding. That's the best way to try and remember things. Let's talk about other factors that affect encoding here. One is the meaningfulness, otherwise known as the self-reference effect. How meaningful something is to you is going to impact how well you remember it. For example, if I'm trying to learn the mountain ranges in China, well, that's going to be very difficult for me because, to be quite honest, no offense to anybody, but I don't really care. That has no big meaning to me. It doesn't apply to my life. I don't have any plans in the near future to go to China and to visit any of these, so it really doesn't affect me much. On the other hand, if something is very meaningful to you, if it's something you deal with a lot, or if it's something you have a big interest in, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to encode and therefore remember that info. Another thing is association value and imagery rating. Association value refers to the number of items that you can associate with a given topic. Okay? For example, the Civil War tends to be easier for people to remember than the Vietnam War. Even though Vietnam occurred much more recent in time period, people associate more with Civil War. You know, you can refer to Atlanta, you know where that's at. And so when we talk about the burning of Atlanta or Sherman's march to the sea through Georgia, you know where that's at and you can associate things with it. Whereas Vietnam, when we talk about Da Nang or Ho Chi Minh City and places like that, you don't associate a whole lot with it. Imagery rating. The more images that you can think of with something, the easier it is to remember. So, for example, the two words hotel and democracy. Hotel is going to be a whole lot easier to remember because you can think of all kinds of times when your family, stayed overnight in a hotel and different things about that. Versus democracy, it's one of those words that doesn't have a whole lot of images associated with it, so it tends to be a little bit tougher. Mnemonic devices can also play a role in terms of trying to help us remember things, and I highly encourage you to kind of make up your own or use your own mnemonic devices. Mnemonic devices are little tricks or aids that you use to try and remember something. For example, the word homes helps you remember the 5 Great Lakes: Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. Okay? The different planets on their way or in order away from the sun. My very educated mother just served us nachos. That's the 8 planets as they go away from the sun. Those are mnemonic devices. Now, one thing about those, the more bizarre or humorous or outlandish that they are, the easier that you tend to remember them. So mnemonic devices are definitely a good thing. The method of loci is also kind of an interesting one. It's where you associate a list of items to be remembered with a list of locations that are familiar to you, and then you follow that route when you're trying to remember the items. So like, let's say you need things from the grocery store and you go to your fridge, you picture yourself going to the fridge, opening it up, and seeing a cow inside the fridge, which reminds you, I need milk. And then from there, you go to the cabinet and you open up the cabinet and you see something there. And basically, if you just kind of make up some like a little route that you can follow, you can kind of remember a list of things that you need to remember. So method of loci is also another thing that's kind of very helpful. The last thing we're going to look at here is chunking. Chunking is another word for grouping. Basically, the idea here is that material will be easier to remember if you group it with similar things or combine it into related units. Most of the time, things like that have been done for you by your teachers or by the textbook. They put them, things in chapters or sections or units. But if not, try and do it on your own because it tends to make things a little bit easier. If you can just kind of chunk or group certain things together in your homework or in your studying, tends to make it easier for you to retain those things. Okay? Try and remember all these different concepts. All of them affect how easy it is for you to encode information.